Now, let's have your question.
Can you give an example of how equality of results undermines prejudice? You said that
Well, equality of result means that we're all the same. Nobody can fail. If you're going to be all the same, you can't be all failures. If people say you're all the same, they mean we're all the same and that we're all very successful people. We have wonderful personalities, pleasing personalities. We all have IQs of 170, right? If you say I'm the same as other people, you don't want to be the same as other people who are morons. So it means we're all wonderful and we have tremendous potential for success. That's just a lie.
Right.
So where equality of result rules the culture, if anyone fails, it can't be their fault because everyone's born equal to everyone else and everyone is a genius. Can't be their fault. So therefore, there has to be society's fault. Society hates you and everyone like you. And it's society that is the cause of your failure. It couldn't be you.
So you can't hold you can't hold people personally responsible for their prejudice?
Of course. But to answer your question specifically, which is a good question, what that does is it mocks true prejudice. When every failure is by definition the result of prejudice, that means that you can't differentiate between what you think is prejudice and what is real prejudice, because there's plenty of prejudice in societies.
How do you think you get around that? That it's like, if you have like a democracy that goes bad and the people like pick something bad, that means the people who were doing the picking were flawed themselves. Like, how do you...
You have to emphasize standards. I talk about that with her all the time. You have to emphasize standards. You can't dumb down standards. You have to keep them very high. And then you have to treat people fairly. I can't look at you and know whether or not you're going to meet this standard. I give you an opportunity. Here's just a simple example. A kid is born a paraplegic. So from the time he's born, he's in a wheelchair or some kind of device. He can't walk, he can't move his arm. Along the way, he becomes a big Alabama fan. And he especially loves the football team of Alabama. So now he's 18, and sure enough, he goes to Tuscaloosa. And he promised his parents he was going to try out for the football team. No, I mean, on the face of it, it's ridiculous. So he wheels himself down during student orientation before classes have started to the stadium. And he asks to see the coach, Saban, the famous Saban. He just happens to be walking by and says, "This young man would like to see you." So Saban is a very dour kind of guy. He says, "Well, what can I do for you?" He says, "I'd like to try out for the team." So you can imagine, he got like taken back. Now, how much time and effort would it take for Saban to say, "All right, let's do it. What do you want to try out for? This is going to take 15 minutes." Right?
Yeah.
Instead of prejudging this kid, I mean, you're certain that this is ridiculous. Wheels him out to the field, says, "What position do you want to try out for?" He says, "I'd like to be a split end." He says, "Well, I just want to let you know we get the greatest recruits from all over the country, sometimes all over the world. And our standard for split ends is you have to run 40 yards in 3.9 seconds, let's say." And the kid says, "Why?" He says, "If you're going to have a standard, you have to understand why you have that standard." He said, "Well, because the quarterback gets the snap and he has to get it to that point on the field very quickly, otherwise he's going to be sacked. Some lineman will tackle him. You have to be at that point of the field very quickly. You understand why we want to be number one every year, so that our split ends have to be down the field as quickly as you can imagine." Well, that's a reasonable explanation. So he says, "I want you to set up on the goal line, and I'm gonna stand at the 40-yard line, when I say go, it's gonna take 15 minutes for this to happen. Go, and of course, it's like 20 minutes before the guy gets there. And Saban says to the guy, I want to, but you can see that, you just, thank you for coming out. And hope you remain a loyal Tide fan. And then he says to one of his assistants, get this guy a hat or a shirt, maybe both. Took 15. So, I mean, that's equality of opportunity. What's the big deal? You have a standard. It's a reasonable standard. You can explain why this is the performance chart. If you want to do this job, this is what you have to do, right? And you explain why this is what you have to do. It's a reasonable standard. It's a high standard if you want to be number one. And you either fulfill that standard or not. If you can't, you find another job you could do. Everybody has a talent. Remember we said one of the purposes of education is to help people find what their talent is.
Sure.
So that's, in a nutshell, what equality of opportunity means. Find the standard for this job, explain it to people, understand it yourself, explain it to people, and then hold to the standard. And if you start saying things like, we want to have at least one Turkish person on the field in our team. Well, I mean, that's a violation of the standard. Anyone could meet the standard as long as they meet the standard. Yes, ma'am.
You had a question?
I have a question, but
Do you want to try out for the Alabama football team? Okay.
Do you remember it now?
I remember my question, but it's kind of a really bad question.
We don't care. There's no such thing as a bad question.
I mean, but wouldn't it be smart to get a guy on a wheelchair to play for Alabama? I mean, nobody's gonna try and tackle him.
That's what you think. That's what you think. He'll be dead within 5 minutes.
So in your example, Saban would be undermining real prejudice if he had just written off the person in the wheelchair from the beginning.
I'm trying to figure out what you're saying. It would be foolish of him not to take 15 minutes out of his time for some young kid who loves him and loves his team, not to give this guy 15 minutes. Even though he knows exactly how it's going to turn out, it's worth, in the name of fairness, to give this kid 15 minutes of his time.
Okay.
I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm trying to wrap my mind around
What?
what my question really is.
Well, think about it for a second.
About
It's not like there's a lot of competition for
prejudice.
questions now. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand what the opposite example would be. Like
All right, I'll try to think of an example.
the opposite example of
Where somebody-
undermining prejudice, true prejudice.
Well, so I suppose you're looking for is an example of where people failed, claimed prejudice, and it was a lie. It was really their fault. Can you think of an example of that in the news or in history?
I'm looking for an example
It happens all
of
the
true
time.
prejudice that was undermined because of equality of results.
I can't think of an example of that, but I want you to help you understand it, I want you to think of an example where someone claimed prejudice and it wasn't, and it didn't exist.
Okay. If it comes to one of y'all first,
Donald Trump.
jump in.
Well, so say say the kid trying out for the football team, if he were allowed to play and he. Okay. Let's say that they're also. He was also Hindu, and he said they don't let me. They never let me play because I'm a Hindu. It's like, well, that's not true. It's they don't let you play because you're not able to play football well.
Okay, okay.
Have you been following this guy Kaepernick? This story. Are you familiar with this? Tell her about it, Noah.
Well, I'm familiar, but not enough to tell the story.
Tell me what's going
Well,
on in college.
there's a quarterback that played for San Francisco.
Oh, the white guy?
He's kind of he's a mixture of things.
Okay.
So he decided
Oh, yeah.
because cops killed a black guy in Missouri, he wasn't going to stand
For the national
for the
anthem.
national anthem.
Okay, yeah.
So there's stand for the national anthem. He's not a very good quarterback, and it's surprising because he has all of the tools. He's very fast. He has a very strong arm, but he just never made it. I mean, he played for San Francisco for many years, and by the end of the fourth year, he was like the third string quarterback. Certainly, there's a lot of prejudice against African Americans in this country, but I don't understand why you wouldn't stand. If, let's say, for example, there was a game in St. Louis, which was close to this town in Missouri. I could see demonstrating you're not going to stand for the state anthem. It wasn't an FBI agent that shot this black guy. It was some local cop in Missouri. Remember that?
Yeah.
So from the beginning, I didn't understand what the connection was. He kept talking about Missouri, but why was he demonstrating for the national anthem? I mean, if he felt that there was something wrong in the United States because of national policy, he could have said that, but he kept talking about. Remember that kid that was shot on the street? So I didn't think it was a very good demonstration to begin with, but I really didn't pay much attention to it. So now he was released by the San Francisco 49ers, and no other team wants to pick him up. So it's been automatically assumed, I hope maybe this will help you, that there's prejudice against him, not because he's black, but because he caused a ruckus by not standing at attention during the national anthem. When the truth is that he's just not very good. I mean,
Okay.
So this is an example of always finding a fault in someone else rather than yourself.
Okay.
Now, is there real prejudice in football? I'll give you an example that exists to this day. It's rare to have a black quarterback, and it's even rarer to have black offensive linemen. Do you know anything about football?
I do.
All right, so you know what I'm talking about. Now, why do you suppose that's the case? I mean, it's clear to me. Everyone else on the team is black except for the offensive lineman and the quarterback.
Well, the quarterback is in control. He calls the plays.
So he's supposed to be
The leader.
Right.
but also smart.
Yeah.
Now, on a football team, it is true that offensive linemen, that's a very difficult position, because if they don't do a good job, and the quarterback is going to literally be dead, whether
Right.
he's in a wheelchair or not. It's clear to me why.
They don't think that the
Black people are
will-
smart enough to do those jobs. They're smart enough to get tackled as running backs. They're smart enough to be tackled as ends. They're smart enough to be defensive people, but they're not smart enough to be offensive linemen.
To protect the
Well, it's
quarterback.
remarkable. The next time, if you're not interested in football, just look on the field when there's a close-up of the offensive line and the defense. The entire defensive line and the linebacks are all black, and the entire offensive line is white.
Do they think that maybe the offensive line is less likely to protect the quarterback
There are
if
all
he's
kinds
white
of
and they're
scheme-
black?
No, that's a good question, but that's not the point. The point is there are a lot of schemes that they go with. There are in order to keep these huge defensive players away from the quarterback, you have to practice all kinds of different holds and maneuvers, and it's remarkable. Just you'll see for yourself. Because it stands, I mean, it's just so startling. It stands out so amazing. And you can see it even through helmets, whether they're white or black. So that's an example in my mind of true prejudice.
Right, I would agree.
And in Kaepernick, it's not. So because they're fixated on Kaepernick, nobody really asked this question about why aren't there more black offensive linemen and quarterbacks. Does that help you understand that?
Yeah.
So I'm glad.
Yeah.
A good question is very important in a class because it helps teachers understand what they're saying even more than they do. And now this helps me understand it even more than I did when I began. So that's the final irony, that in the name of equality, when equality is taken to an extreme, people start looking for guidance from wise guys, snake oil salesmen, who then enslave them, and guess what? Everybody is equally enslaved. And that, here again, and that's why Tocqueville said, you're more likely to have terrible totalitarian dictatorships as a result of a democratic society going wrong than some kind of feudal monarchy.
Because they did it to themselves?
They did it to themselves. That's exactly the point. How about so did you get your question together?
My question was, aren't there like football teams that do have?
A few. There are a few.
Because I do watch a lot of the games. I don't watch them. I look at them and pretend to be interested like everybody else.
Well, who's the most famous black quarterback?
I don't know.
This
From
guy
Auburn.
Cam Newton.
Yeah, Cam Newton.
Whenever everybody gets
Who's been sucking lately, by the way. No, but you can imagine the pressure on these black quarterbacks
Yeah.
because they're facing all of these prejudices, and if they don't do well, then people say, "I told you so."
Oh, yeah.
There really aren't that many black coaches either. You have maybe a right under the coach, you have an offensive defensive coordinator, but you don't have that many.
Well, here again, that's an excellent point. That's clearly a prejudice. It's clearly a prejudice. You're not smart enough to do it. Instead
In
of
the one
saying, here's the
area-
job, here's what needs to be done, you either do it or you don't.
In the one area where black people have traditionally been supposedly more dominant, but
What area?
it's the sports.
Yeah, I know, but
Sport.
that,
But that's that it's not real. I don't know. I mean, could you say that's even really true when there's
well, but.
they're not allowed in
And many
leadership.
black people take great pride in that, not realizing that white people, again, look at that, say, that's the only thing they can do. White people say, well, black people are born superior in sports, and many black people take that as a compliment. It's not meant as a compliment. It's meant as that's the only thing you can do. Slaves can pick cotton from morning to night, and black basketball players can run up and down the court without any hesitation. It's not meant as a compliment. That's the horrible thing about it. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it another prejudice way, like when you see like people in basketball, there aren't a lot of whiter people
That's
in
right.
basketball either, because black people are most known to have to play like basketball instead of football.
And what I'm saying is that this is both a blessing and an evil, because if a whole race is known for being athletic, you follow? I mean, that means that that's the only thing you can do. That's just a lie. I mean, it's terrible, and it's sad to take pride in that, when in fact it's a lie.
It would be okay to take pride in it if it were not in the context of equality of results, if it were in the context of like a meritocracy, and you, on a, like a person, if you were personally responsible. I'm not saying that it would ever be good to say the whole race is good at one thing, but
Well, the
I don't know.
point is,
That's
be
it's
proud in a
complicated.
person. So, for
Yeah,
example,
that's what I'm
when I
saying.
was growing up, the first black player, first of all, baseball was the most popular sport when I was growing up. By far, now it's not. But then it was. And, I mean, my hero was Jackie Robinson. That person, Jackie Robinson, not a whole race of people, white or black or yellow or polka dot.